Strange Minds 6. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be getting back into The Octunnumi by Trevor Allen Forrest. But before we begin, I would like to ask if you guys can please hit that like button, and if you're not already, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean a great deal to me. And without further ado, grab your snacks, grab your drinks, sit back, relax, and let's get to it, shall we? And how's that working out for you? Judging by the view that greets them as the garden door slams shut on the villagers, bearing down on them, and promptly disappears, it is not hard to guess just how much protection is in place in this particular insomid. The charred remains of a once elegant Victorian building stare back at them, plums of black smoke silhouetted against the setting sun. Still, rising from the fallen bricks and timber, dense smoke pours from the recently blazing building. The last remnant of the roof teetering before collapsing inwards, sending ash-strewn clouds billowing out, momentarily covering the entire remains. Although far enough away not to be of any concern, the three instinctively take a few paces back to the woodland they had just stepped into. Trad, you are nothing if not predictable. A voice from the darkness cuts sharply through their thoughts. It got me here, didn't it? Trad replies without turning. Yes, it did. Stepping out of the shadows, the usually elegant, immaculate, calm and collected Ellery Roselle Novello Swift is anything but. Soot covered from head to toe, clothes scorched and torn, blonde hair tangled, white streaks of tears running in rivulets down her charcoal cheeks. She tries unsuccessfully to smile. If there was one thing that was a certainty within the group, it was that no matter what or how many regions Ellery embarked on, whatever challenge she undertook, she was always, well, Ellery. But not today. Alarmed at the distress of her friend, Phoebe launches herself over and hugs Ellery's neck. "Hello, Phoebe," she whispers affectionately. "Why here, Ellery? Why come here?" Trad asks, still staring at the smoke spiraling upwards. "Unless you..." He glances back at Ellery, gesturing the decimated building. "Did this?" She laughs. "You give me too much credit. No, I came when I heard it was under attack." Still not getting why. "I thought you'd be glad." He glances at the remains. "You know, now it's gone." "Can she be trusted?" she asks, glancing at Grace, who feels slightly awkward in her own skin, something she suspects is quite common when standing next to Ellery, of whom, even in her current state, and some 12 years her senior, the term English rose is still strikingly accurate. Yes, of course, Reg replies. She's one of us. She's Nate's daughter, is what she is, Ellery responds. How? Grace attempts to speak. She's trusted, Trad states. A slight nod of acknowledgement, and Ellery steps to one side, sweeping her arm across the blackness behind her as a window opens onto another insulate, revealing the soot-smudged faces of a group of children huddled together, staring back at them, their eyes wide and frightened. When I got here, it was already underway. She nods to the remains. I didn't get to them all, she says, the tears falling again. I can only hope the others manage to get out before the access points shut down. Phoebe retrieves a lace hanky from the compartment in her arm and hands it to Ellery. Who would do this? Grace asks, staring at the distraught faces before her and back to the building collapsing behind her. She doesn't know? Ellery questions, dabbing her face. Reg shakes his head. Right, she sighs, regaining her composure. Know what? Grace asks. What don't I know? An explosion of light fills the sky, spurring Ellery to gather the children, closing the window as she does so. That was the only safe instrument I could access, Ellery continues, indicating the now closed access point. But with all the other points blocked, it had no way forward. I couldn't make a connection with any of them except back to this one, and a barge of fire erupts from the house. I figured that I could hide them until you got here, she adds. And by the way, she addresses Reg. You are late. Late? Trad echoes, astonished. You were expecting us? She was expecting us? He turns to Reg, who, choosing to ignore the question, sets about opening a window. Who do you think set the trail, Trad? Ellery smiles, signaling for the first few of the children to step through. And you knew about this? Trad turns to his brother. That we were looking for Ellery? Reg waves another few through as the sky lights up again. Not exactly, but I did know we would be traveling through Insomits. You would rather not. So, and you could not tell me this? Ellery smiles sweetly at Trad as the disheveled children pass. Trad, how else would we have got you here? Really? How willing would you have been to visit my homeland? She pauses, looking up at the ruined, smoldering timbers. Or here. Not at all. Exactly. And I needed you both to get my people to safety. By people, you mean the pesky imps. Trad mutters. I mean, she smiles, my people. Calling them your people doesn't stop them from being imps. Trad replies sulkily. You could have just asked. As the last of the children file past, she smiles at Trad. No, Trad. It had to be spontaneous. An invite to you would be an invite to others, she says, glancing briefly at Grace. And so my confidence lay in you. She lightly strokes his cheek. So sweet that you still think of me. Phoebe said as much. Startled at the comment, Phoebe frantically makes hand gestures across her throat behind Trad's back in an effort to silence Ellery. Only because I knew how you felt about this place. He pauses, pulling away from her. No other reason. Nothing else. Of course. Ellery replies as Phoebe slowly maneuvers herself behind Ellery's head. Sure, if that's what you want to believe. Wait a minute. Phoebe said? What the hell has Phoebe got to do with this? He looks around. Phoebe, he calls. Anyway. Ellery smiles, fluffing up her hair to provide more cover for Phoebe. Thank goodness for predictability. With the last of the children through, the new Insamid, Ellery indicates for Grace to go ahead of her and says, anyway, you only dislike my homeland because hate. Trad corrects. Dislike, she stresses, because you cannot control it. Your abilities are limited there. That's why you dislike the place. Much the same reason why you dislike Fethris so much. Pesky imps, he mutters. Who always manage to get the better of you? She smiles lightly, touching the back of his head to remove the dry mud. Pausing before closing the window, Trad glances back at the battle still raging in the distance. I thought this Insamid was safe, off-grid, he says, as Phoebe slowly creeps back into his pocket. So did everyone else, Ellery replies, resting her head on his arm as the window clicks closed. And that is the end of this chapter. Actually, we're gonna continue reading because the next chapter is also short. So, next chapter. Will someone please explain? As the door slams shut in her face, Grace curses under her breath in frustration. Wait, in there, she mimics in her head. You'll like it in there, she continues as she feels for a light switch. Run along, we've got grown-up things to do, okay? That's not exactly what was said, but it was definitely implied. Found it. I am not as a multitude of wall lights begin to illuminate the room in front of her. Grace is brought to a breathless halt at the beginning of what seems to be an endless corridor. Its walls hung frame to frame with paintings and drawings. "This is magnificent," she breathes. The frames stretch up and along as far as she can see, a representation of every painting by every artist ever. Walls hung with more creative expression than could possibly even exist, let alone be in one place. Grace's heart starts to race. If there was one thing Grace had inherited from her mother, it was the love of art. Probably down to the fact that most of her childhood had been in the company of some of the greatest artists of all time. Not great then, of course. Then they were struggling bohemian vagabonds, dropouts of society, but eventually, time, as time does, had bestowed on them the title of great. And now, to be so close to such masterpieces as to be able to see the detail, the brushwork, to be so close. Do not even think about it. Startled by Ellery's sudden appearance, Grace snatches back her outstretched hand. I wasn't, Grace stutters. "Yes, you were," Ellery replies flatly, "and unless you know what you are doing, which I very much doubt, I suggest you keep your hands to yourself." "Right," Grace replies sullenly, hardly recognizing the now clean and shiny Ellery, decked out in the Alliance uniform. Well, her version of it. "Sorry," she mutters. "Okay then," Ellery sighs, lightly touching the edge of the heavy gilt frame. Directly in front of her, she slides the entire wall along to her left. "So which one?" she mutters to herself, then changing the direction of the frames by sending them downwards with a swipe of her hands. "Ah, now this, I believe, is what we are looking for." As the momentum of the sliding wall comes gradually to a stop, Grace stutters. "It's not, it's, this is a..." Grace gasps as she recognizes the picture in front of her. "No, it cannot be." As Ellery gathers the equally shiny children who appear to have been Ellery coordinated, Grace continues, "This is hanging in the..." "Shall we?" Ellery cuts in as she and the children step into the picture. "Try and look like you belong," she shoots back to a bewildered Grace. "And for goodness sake, close your mouth." Smiling at the farm workers who, unperturbed by their sudden appearance and clearly used to the comings and goings of strangers, touch their caps as they pass. They have arrived, it would seem, in the turn of the 18th century, or more accurately, in a Turner of the 18th century. Grace chuckles at her private joke. Yep, this is definitely a Turner, and talented as the painter of light artist was. Here on the inside it is less light, more fog. Noting the now transformed group, Ellery, resplendent in period dress, complete with parcel, surrounded by the children, all in their Turner Sunday best. Ellery's hand gently draped over a little boy who clings to her wide skirt as they walk. Even Phoebe, now all ringlets and curls, parasol and dress, has been Turner squid, and the twins, well, they're pretty much unchanged. Aware that her hair is also bouncing, Grace realizes that she too must have ringlets. How ridiculous, she thinks, struggling to control the movement of her crinoline petticoat under the heavy fabric of her skirts as it, too, bobs in time with her hair. But then, what could be more ridiculous than walking through a painting? We just walked into a picture, she says out loud, to no one in particular. Of course we did. Nothing unusual about that at all, huh? Grace mumbles, looking at her hands. I even look like an old oil painting. Of course I do. All blurry and Turner square. I'm in oil painting. I'm in an oil painting. So of course I would be in oil. Naturally. I mean, it would be really weird if I was in pastel now, wouldn't it? 'Cause that would be very weird, because pastel and oils... She's rambling, Trad says, glancing at the dazed expression on Grace's face. VBB rambling, VB confirms. I know. Reg replies, amused at Grace's continued chatter. Well, they don't mix, you see, as Turner himself found out, Grace continues, unaware she is being spoken about. No. Or watercolor. That wouldn't be right at all. Should we stop her? Trad asks. She'll be fine, Reg replies dismissively. It happens. It's the paint. It affects some people. She'll be back in the nut house for real if you are not careful. VB, for real. BB agrees. Mixing oils and watercolor and pastel in the same... Stand still and shut up, Ellery hisses at Grace as she taps the air directly in front of them. Well, excuse... As Reg clamps his hand over Grace's mouth, she takes a moment to understand what has just happened. But before them, an entire area is suddenly blackened, up, down, and across, like the world has just stopped. A shaft of bobbing light cutting through the black, intermittent singing makes its way toward them. Someone is practicing their scales. La la doo doo me me. The sound increases as a night security guard steps into view, momentarily blinded by the beam of light sweeping the room from his touch. Grace blinks, and the light comes back to them. Don't move, Reg whispers to Grace, though he doesn't appear to move his lips. The guard mumbles, coming closer, his huge face looming in, eyes peering intently at them, or rather at the picture, hesitating for a second, and then shaking his head. This place is gonna be the death of me. He chuckles as he turns and heads out of the room, launching into full operatic aria as he does. That was close. Reg breathes, releasing Grace. Relax, he didn't see us, did he? Trad says, as the sound of singing diminishes. Luck, not judgment, Ellery snaps, casting her eyes to Grace. Jumping into the blackness, Trad and Phoebe resize, their appearance returning to normal as they land. Trad extends his hand to assist Ellery as the rest follow. With everyone now clear of the picture, resized and paint effect free, Trad throws up a light orb and looks around the empty gallery. Looks like we're the first, he whispers, glancing at the airy of the paintings covering the gallery walls. First what? Grace asks quietly. It could be a long wait. Reg mutters, watching the doors. Wait for... Before Grace can finish, colors pour from the surrounding pictures, stretching and shaking off the art medium that had camouflaged them. A steady stream of people drop to the floor, resize and regain their own coloring, as their chosen art piece deposits them on the floor, the colors retreating back into the frames. Or not. Reg grins as he moves to welcome the new arrivals. And now colors are people. Of course. Grace mutters as silent greetings are exchanged. Stepping up onto a bench, Reg proceeds to address the gathering, gesturing and nodding to the others, who respond in a like manner. There's a ripple of silent laughter, as if everybody had just heard a joke. Everybody, that is, apart from Grace. Looking around at all the faces all focused on Reg, who seems to be communicating with his hands, she leans into Trad. Are they deaf? She asks. What? The sign language. She gestures with her hands. Shaking his head, he lightly touches her arm, and she is suddenly jolted by the voices of everyone, talking at once. Reg's voice can be heard, asking them to calm down. Okay, he communicates. Yes, he points to the person directly in front of him. No, to the person at the back, and maybe to the little girl on his right. What have I missed? Grace asks out loud, a little too loud, and is greeted by a universal shh, emitting from everyone's head as the entire room turns to look at her. Smiling sheepishly at the glaring faces, Trad sidles in front of Grace. Turning to her, he taps his head. Think it, he communicates. Sorry, she smirks. So, what have I missed? As the beam of the guard's torch sweeps across the bottom of the closed door, Grace is reminded of the game. Musical statues. All eyes watch the light pass. As it disappears, there is an audible sigh, just as the doors slam open. And that, my dear friends, is the end of this second chapter. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and there will be another video for the following chapters. I do hope that you're enjoying the story as much as I am. And with that, this is Ruby, signing off.